All right, so I wanted to talk to you about how do you turn $100 into $10,000 and ask people if they have good solutions, if they've actually done this, if they've turned $100 to $10,000. And I think it's a really interesting thing. And I want to propose what a PhD in business, a PhD in finance would actually tell you to do with that. And I study entrepreneurship, I study innovation, I've taken a bunch of finances courses at the PhD level. And the answer is really, really counterintuitive that you probably would not expect. So many of you that are watching this are probably wanting to make money extremely quickly, right? So that's what all the financial gurus will do. If you watch most of the financial business news, it's terrible. It's all about how to make money as quickly as you possibly can. And the vast majority of the people that actually follow that advice end up becoming broke. They don't do what everybody else is telling them to do. The noise and the chatter and all of these business news programs is a disaster. It's an absolute disaster. What would a PhD in business tell you to actually do? There's two things I would tell you to do. On one side, I want you to think about how that you are amazing. But becoming amazing, becoming somebody that actually makes a lot of money requires a significant investment in yourself. That means you have to work. That means if you don't want to get an education, that's the quickest way that we all know is actually going to net you return in the future. Not just an education. I think that is a misnomer. You have to sort of pick things that are good for you and look at the market, right? Actually look at, hey, this provides a return. It's not always obvious what that actually is, but sometimes it is really obvious. It's the things that your grandparents or your parents tell you to actually do. You know, the accountings and the engineers and the nursing and all that kind of stuff is really boring, right? On that side of it, that's how you do it. But, even if you don't want to do that education thing, you can make plenty of money and do extremely well. And this is what I would tell you to do. Pick up that thing that you want to do. And it's usually, if you don't have an education, it's going to be doing something like mowing lawns and reinvest or building. Doing something with your hands, just because it's like difficult to sort of understand some of the conceptual ideas. It just takes some schooling to actually get there. I'm not saying that in a bad way. I'm just saying it just takes some time. So if you're going to do more of the trade route, take that thing, reinvest. Take that thing, reinvest in yourself, and keep doing that for a long, 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 long time. So instead of thinking, this is where I think the sort of gurus want you to take $100 and turn it into $10,000 next year. That's a mistake. That is an absolute mistake. I would never suggest for you to do that. But if you take that $100 and you turn it into $10,000 in 20 years, I think that is wonderful. It's a great investment. That's probably the way that you should be doing that. So if you do that, that's the one side of it. That's how you're actually going to do very well. The other side is to reinvest in assets that are growing and collectively growing over a long time. And my rule of thumb is to invest in index funds and mutual funds. And I don't care what those things are, but just really, really broadly in many different assets. And there's a good rule of thumb to think about how quickly these things should actually grow. And that is, your money should roughly, because this is how the stock market is growing for many, many years now, many, many years. There's good data on this. Roughly, it's going to double every 7 years. It's kind of an estimate, right? So if you have $100 in 7 years, you should have $200. And then in another 7 more years, you're going to have $400. And in another 7 more years, you're going to have $1,600, right? So it's going to take you some time to actually get there. But what that's going to do is that's going to grow at the pace of what really good assets actually grow in this world. Now, if you don't want to do that, right, and you're thinking it's going to take you too long to actually get there by doing this sort of slow investing, which is what a normal asset growth will actually go at, I think to think that it's going to grow more faster than that roughly 10% per year is a big ask. That is something that is generally implausible in the long term. Now, do some people get that? Absolutely, some people get that, right? Like, and the odd person actually gets that. But is that extraordinary? Yes. So what does extraordinary mean? It's either means that you are very gifted, which I don't believe most people actually are, or you're extremely lucky, and which I think most people actually are, right? I think it's very difficult to sort of see things beyond what other people can do. And ourselves, we get wrapped up in all of this sort of hubris, right? So that's a big fancy word that means that you're just overconfident. You think that you understand the world. The world is really, 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 really complicated. And to think that you're the one person that understands the world is very presumptuous. So what I would get you to do is, instead of turning that $100 into $10,000 next year and thinking about how could I do this quickly, I would want you to think about how could I do it slowly? How can I do it so it's guaranteed that I can turn this into $10,000? Or not guaranteed, but roughly guaranteed, a much sort of better estimate of what that actually is. And so if you're thinking that you can take that $100 and turn it into $10,000 in 30, 40 years, I would be very proud of you. I would think that you're making good financial investments that's actually going to do something in your life. You think you're going to be able to outsmart the market. You think that you're going to be able to create this entrepreneurial venture. You think that you're going to create all these kind of, whatever the scheme is today. You'll be able to take this $10,000 or this $100 and turn it into $10,000 in a year. You're out to lunch. You're really out to lunch, unless you're extremely lucky for whatever reason. But I don't think most people are, right? I think what ends up happening, this is a well-known problem, what you end up doing is let's say you take assets, right? And you have 1,000 people and you give them $100. One of those 1,000 people are going to make $10,000. And then what you're going to do is focus on that one instead of focusing on the average of what everybody does across those 1,000 people. And that average is much, 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 much smaller. And this is called the selection bias problem. You're focusing on that one person, that one individual that did really well. And that is extremely problematic. That is problematic because you're making inferences based on this weird outlier typically. And we all tend to do that, but I want you to come back to what the average actually looks like. The average is boring. The average is ordinary. The average is just going up little bit by little bit by little bit every year. And it's going slowly and it's going painfully. And many years you don't actually do that well. And once you start thinking about this, and you start realizing that all of those financial gurus and all that sort of buzzy stuff that you hear on the news about them talking about this and that, you're gonna make really dumb decisions if you focus on the sort of business news and all that stuff. It's terrible. What I want you to focus on is go slow, think about how you can grow those assets very, very slowly over the long term. And then eventually you actually get there. So that's what I would do. And I've learned my lesson many times. The Reciprocity Project, this thing that I've invested a great deal of time and effort in, and I'm very skilled in this area, is not netting a return today. And I want you to think about that. If this person, this buffoon right here can't do it, why do you think somebody else can do it? I don't know. But I do know that if I keep doing this and I reinvest it, it can turn into something that's pretty cool in 30, 40, 50 years. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.